Kochia, Kochia scoparia. The mention of this weed conjures consternation in the minds of many. But when I think of Kochia, I think of sparrows. Hi, I'm Shane Sater, author of the What's Going On Out There blog. Today's reading is from November 7th, 2022. It's titled, Kochia, What This Despised Weed Does for Fall Sparrows. If you're a more visual person and want to follow along with text and photos while you listen, you can also find this story on my website, what'sgoingonblog.org. So now, let's continue with the story. October 24th, 2022 was a day when it was hard to miss the connection between Kochia and sparrows. A snowstorm had pushed through Helena the day before. The glowing golden leaves of the sandbar willows, Salix exigua, were covered with wet snow. It was a reminder that winter was coming. Montana's 6-month season of cold and snow was on its way. And among the thick, bushy kochia stands, lining a recently restored section of Prickly Pear Land Trust's 7 Mile Creek stream restoration site near Helena, the sparrows seemed to be everywhere. 3 other naturalists had joined me on this morning's survey. Photographer Leah Fry had brought an arsenal of cameras along. Check out more of her amazing work at leaf-images.com. Sean Watts and Scott Beeler were helping to spot birds and track behaviors. Part 1. Sparrows in the Kochia. And as soon as we got into the Kochia, there was a lot to track. Right away, I could hear American tree sparrows, recent arrivals from the Arctic, making their tip calls from 2 different directions. Then Leah spotted 3 more birds as they hopped into the tops of the Kochia. These were migrating Lincoln sparrows, compact with crisp, dark streaks across their subtle tan breasts. And it was surprising to see them here this late. Lincoln sparrows nest in wet, willowy patches in the mountains of Montana and the boreal forest of Canada and Alaska. Here at 7 Mile Creek, they're a common fall migrant, their numbers typically peaking in late September. By now, late October, I would generally expect that all of them would have already moved through. But this year, with a mild fall, it was clear that a few Lincoln sparrows were lingering longer than expected. Soon we saw another sparrow perching on top of a kochia plant. Surely this was just one of those that we had already seen? But no, this was a song sparrow, streaky like the Lincoln sparrows, but larger, its breast white rather than tan. Its streaks were thicker, too, as if they had been painted with a crayon instead of with a fine-tipped pen. Part 2. Song sparrows and migration. The song sparrow is the more adaptable cousin of the Lincoln sparrow. It nests across much of Canada, migrating south as winter approaches. But it's also a common nester in Montana, not just in wet willow thickets in the mountains, but also nearly anywhere, high or low elevation, that there is water and good cover. Seeing a song sparrow here, it's hard to tell what its story might be. Is it one of those song sparrows that nests here, sticking around through the fall to feed on kochia seeds? Or is this bird a migrant, moving south from Canada? But today, the song sparrows kept popping up in the kochia. By the end of the day, we had counted at least 11 of them here, way more than the handful we find during the breeding season. With so many song sparrows present, it seemed likely that we were seeing some Canadian migrants moving south in preparation for winter. Part 3. White-crowned sparrows from Canada. The American tree sparrows I had heard at first remained secretive. It was only later, in the chokecherries, that we got a good look at them. But soon we saw a 4th species of sparrow perching in the kochia tops. This one, the white-crowned sparrow, was the largest yet. Unstreaked on the breast like the American tree sparrow, we could see its pale orange beak from a distance. Soon several more of them appeared, a small flock. All of these white-crowned sparrows were this summer's hatchlings, their striped heads brown, not the striking black and white of the adults. Eventually, we counted at least 8 of them. They looked at us quizzically as they fed on kochia seeds. Like the Lincoln sparrows, these white crowns were unusually late migrants. En route from their birthplaces in the boreal forest of Canada or Alaska, they were stopping here to stock up on seeds as they fled the approaching winter. Soon, like the Lincoln sparrows, they would be gone, not to be seen again in Montana until the spring. Note: like Lincoln sparrows, there are also white-crowned sparrows that nest in the mountains of Montana. But those birds have a dark stripe not only behind the eye, but also in front of it. Based on this distinction, we could tell that these migrants were from the more northerly boreal forest population. Part 4. Sparrow Identification. Phew! So many sparrows. No wonder some people dismiss them all as little brown birds. But like the weedy kochia that feeds them, I believe sparrows are far more interesting than people often assume. And with a bit of practice, they aren't all that hard to tell apart. Let's review these 4. Lincoln sparrow. Small, with a very pointy bill. Breast with fine, dark streaks on an orange-tan background. Song sparrow. A bit larger, with a broader, more triangular bill. Breast with wider streaks on a white background. White-crowned sparrow. One of our largest sparrows, with a yellow or orange bill. Breast solid gray, without streaks or spots. Adults have black and white stripes on their heads. Immatures have chestnut-brown stripes instead. American tree sparrow. Breast grayish like a white-crowned sparrow, but with a dark central spot. Upper part of the bill gray, lower part yellow, chestnut-striped head. The sparrows kept appearing. There seemed to be dozens, maybe more. After all, we only had 4 sets of eyes, and there were thousands of kochia plants where sparrows could hide. Maybe there were 50 sparrows in here today, maybe more. At one point, we saw 5 song sparrows perching together. Others made unidentifiable, lispy calls nearby. And each time a bird popped into view, we had to check to see if it was something new. There's so many species in these little groups that, positionally, you can't say what's what, Scott remarked. Part 5. Watching for rarities and other surprises. Earlier, Sean had posed the important question of what other species we might hope to see here. And so it was that we kept our eyes open for the rarer possibilities as well. We watched for Harris's sparrows with their massive pink bills. White-throated sparrows with a prominent yellow spot in front of their eye. Swamp sparrows, like a rarer version of a Lincoln sparrow, and without strong breast streaks. Fox sparrows, resembling the song sparrow, but with their breast streaks made up of reddish rows of V's. We kept our eyes peeled, but none of these rarities materialized. Suddenly, Scott noticed something unusual. It fell out of the sky in the gray blink of an eye, disappearing among the kochia. Or had Scott only imagined it? We waited. Nothing seemed to have changed. The sparrows kept perching and calling. Snow dripped slowly from the kochia. And then, minutes later, we saw it well. A sharp-shinned hawk, petite and ferocious. It leapt up from the kochia, disturbed from its attempt at ambushing the sparrows. There it perched in the chokecherries, a tiny predator intent on a sparrow lunch. Here was the food web, right in front of our eyes. From kochia seed to sparrow crop to a sharp-shinned hawk's lunch. The last link in this chain was delayed for a time. But here or in the next kochia stand along the route of its migration, the sharp-shinned hawk would surely try again. Part 6. Kochia, the hated weed. To most people, kochia is a weed. Native to Asia and Eastern Europe, it's an annual that has an amazing propensity to thrive along roadsides and in the disturbed soil of crop fields. People spray herbicides so often to control it that kochia has become resistant to several of them. As an annual, Kochia's strategy is to grow fast, produce a cornucopia of seeds, and then get out. Here at 7 Mile Creek, Kochia has benefited from soil disturbance by excavators during stream restoration work. This patch of weeds is a short-lived phenomenon. In a few years, perennials like smooth brome, Bromus inermis, will outcompete it. Part 7. Kochia, the sparrow's food. But to sparrows, the very traits that make Kochia the bane of farmers make it a popular fall food source. It's common, and it thrives where few other plants manage to grow. It's loaded with seeds. Its dense stands provide shelter from the weather and from predators. So what does all of this mean? Is Kochia good, or is it bad? As with all plants, it's difficult to make such a simplistic value judgment. If you're trying to grow wheat, Kochia probably isn't your favorite plant. But if you're a sparrow looking for seeds at the tail end of fall migration, it might be just the ticket. I probably wouldn't recommend planting Kochia in your yard for wildlife habitat. If you're looking for seed-rich annuals that like disturbed soil, I'd recommend some of our native plants instead. Think of pit seed goosefoot, Chenopodium berlanderi, giant seed goosefoot, Chenopodium simplex, common sunflower, Helianthus annuus, and perhaps marsh elder, Iva xanthifolia. But if you find a thick patch of Kochia in the fall, don't just call it rude names. Grab your binoculars and take a slow walk through it, and let me know which sparrows you find. Thanks for listening. That's all for now. Again, you can find all of this material in written form, along with lots of photos, on my website, whatsgoingonblog.org. That's also where you can sign up for email updates when new stories are published. And if you'd like to join those generous folks who make my work possible, that's also where you can find my Patreon page and make a monthly donation. I believe in making these stories available to everyone, and so a donation is never expected. But if you're in a place where you can give me that support, it's a huge help. Until next time, get outside. Find a Kochia patch in your neighborhood, and let me know what sparrows you find there.